Chapter 0. We see our protagonist, named Hyeonjun Kang, an F-class hunter, who woke up to her 990,000 past lives, and we see that she is going to fight against some orcs, thinking that if she already lost all those times, it is time that I won, even though he has no real talent. Chapter 1. Now we see him surrounded by skeleton warriors, while he thinks that everyone was defeated except him who is class F, although he realizes that those monsters should not be there because they are of higher levels, and also the dungeon entrance is closed. In that, our protagonist thinks that if he could still win, he just needs more strength, when suddenly, a voice says that he has touched one of his past lives, for which he will make a forced intervention, appearing Sidon Miller, the last saint of the sword. Sidon possesses Kang, giving him the strength he needs, as he thinks it's the same as the dream he had earlier. Suddenly our protagonist is awakened by other fighters, but he is scared and stunned by what happened to his past life, until the one who woke him up tells him that he just passed out and then fell asleep, so he fires him from his group without paying him. Kang complains to him, telling him that he charged the aggro, but the one who fired him tells him that our protagonist drank all the cure and only slowed them down, so Kang tells him that he will show him what a hunter is capable of growing. But this boy tells him that if he doesn't like it, report it to the association, leaving with his partner, leaving our protagonist only important for not being able to do anything. Now Kang tells us what his world is like, where there are dungeons, monsters, and the people who awaken an ability are hunters. They are classified according to their achievements and abilities, and that is why they treat him like garbage, since he is in class F. But Kang thinks that this does not matter to him, because he has Hyeonjun as a lover, with whom he celebrates that day. 1 year of love, although in his appointment, it ends him, because she likes someone else and also because she advanced from class F to class C. We then see Kang at the port, looking at the horizon, while thinking about his girlfriend, when Seokju arrives, a friend of his, who asks about his girlfriend and tells him that she will listen to her sorrows, but begins to mock because our protagonist has not made an effort to improve, although he still invites him something, since Kang has no money. The moment Seokju goes shopping, our protagonist begins to think that everyone has a talent, and although he thought he would discover his, remembering how they had rejected him and that he really should give up. In that, a man approaches him, who asks him if he believes in past lives, and that, although he knows that he is a class F hunter, he feels the past lives of very important people in him, the most powerful, and that, if you want to become strong, you can achieve it because they are close. This gentleman tells him that if he doesn't believe him, he soon will, leaving our protagonist surprised. Suddenly, Seokju arrives, with something to drink, asking for that man. But our protagonist tells him that he doesn't know who he is, but he asks his friend if he believes in past lives. By nightfall, Kang is already drunk, and he begins to hear the voices of his past lives calling him. But since Seokju didn't hear anything, he changes the conversation and asks his friend if anyone needs a trunk. Seokju asks him why he wants to do that, and as our protagonist tells him that he has to pay the rent and the orphanage, Seokju tells him that there is a class group that needs one, but they are not good people. Kang thanks him, telling him that it's good for his friend to work in dungeon management. After finishing drinking, Seokju leaves him at his house and tells his friend that he will call him to tell him where that group will meet. When he opens the door of his house, a light comes out that surrounds our protagonist, and suddenly a soul in the shape of a Roman soldier appears, calling him by name and introducing himself as Carthage, the shield of justice that protects the north of the kingdom and his past life. Episode 2. Our protagonist does not understand who he is until he remembers what the man told him in the port. But Carthage continues talking, and feeling fear in our protagonist, he throws his spear at him. Kang feels that he is bleeding and is going to die, but when he realizes, he did not have any injuries. But Carthage tells him that he cannot live without his permission. This scares Kang, who believes that he will stay with Carthage forever, suffering, until he sees the door of the house and tries to open it, thinking of running away, but Carthage insults him by calling him a coward, which angers our protagonist, who begins to tell him that, although he did not have a talent, before he had hope, but that is useless if you are weak, and angrily asks him not to talk about him without knowing him. Carthage realizes that our protagonist has reacted and tells him that he is there to give him his knowledge. No one will take what is his and dominate everything. At that moment, all of Kang's past lives begin to send him greetings, and Carthage gives him his shield and tells him that if he wants the power to face his destiny, he must raise it, since, without sacrifices, he does not earn anything. Kang hesitantly holds up the shield, and Carthage tells him that he will access its full power if he parries any of his attacks. At first he couldn't stop it, but after more than 1,000 defeats, He lost his fear of death and finally managed to block Carthage's attack. Cartago congratulates him and tells him that many things will change when he wakes up from his dream. The next morning, Kang is awakened by the call of his friend, who gives him the information of the dungeon where he will find the Class C. He starts to enlist him while thinking that his dream was very real, because he still has the feeling of to be pierced by the spear of Carthage. Before leaving, he sees the shield he was given when he became a hunter and remembers Carthage's words, so he puts it on and leaves. Upon arrival, he meets Hyeonjun, who was with Sang-ho, and when he sees our protagonist, he claims him on the shield, when he will only carry bags, insulting him. This angers our protagonist, and we see that Hashishin, the Master of Shadows, praises the evil that Kang has inside, but he only apologizes to Sang-ho. They arrive at the dungeon door, and when Sang-ho opens it, our protagonist feels the same as when Carthage threw his spears at him. The sensation of death in that spears come out of the dungeon and attack Sang-ho, along with the other hunters. Chapter 3. In that, we see that Carthage had managed to protect our protagonist. In this way, with his shield, he was not injured, although everyone believes that he is dead because the spears hit him square. Suddenly, skeleton knights come out, and everyone starts fighting them. At the end, Sang-ho realizes that those skeleton knights should not go out in that dungeon, and that is why Jin-sung, one of his own, has died. Then Sung-soo tells them that it must have been a mistake by the administration and that it is best not to continue. Our protagonist supports the idea of not continuing, thinking that he was saved by Carthage's voice. But at that moment, he leans on the door and it opens, so they must continue inside the dungeon. Suddenly, a skeleton sergeant falls from the ceiling and attacks Sung-soo, killing him. Sang-ho asks Hyeonjun to buff her, but she is in shock in that the skeleton sergeant is going to attack Kang directly. But he realizes that he can read the movements of that skeleton, and using Carthage's techniques, he manages to defeat that skeleton sergeant. Then we see how the other skeleton knights begin to attack, but our protagonist manages to defeat them, although in the end only Hyeonjun and he are left alive. Hyeonjun, confused by Kang's power, begins to tell him that they love each other and not to abandon her, so our protagonist tells her that she won't do it, while he thinks that she is very selfish. They reach another door, and Hyeonjun acts as if he is afraid, but he just wanted to take advantage of our protagonist to get out of that dungeon. In that, they open it and see a bridge, so she asks Kang to go first, thinking that she sends him as bait. Our protagonist crosses without problems, so Hyeonjun begins to cross, while she will treat him well until she gets out of there, because he is capable of doing anything for her, and then she will think about what to do with him. But suddenly, we see that something under the bridge wakes up. Chapter 4. As Hyeonjun was crossing, a shark jumps out and grabs her by the neck, and although she asks for help, our protagonist tries to save her. But when she can't, she follows her path, since she had Sidon, another past soul, possessing him, and he is a cold being. Our protagonist goes through another door, but Sidon realizes that he is still very innocent and leaves, so Kang reacts and runs to want to go back for Hyeonjun, when he sees more skeleton knights and begins to fight against them. The skeletons hit him on the head and surround him, so our protagonist, lying on the floor, begins to think how all this happened and that, if he had the strength of a while ago, he could win. In that, Sidon Miller, the last saint of the sword, possesses it, and in one attack he ends with all the skeleton knights, so he leaves, leaving our protagonist lying on the floor. We then see how all of Kang's past lives are gathered together, discussing why Sidon stepped in and helped him, while Carthage wants to go in and train him, at which Hoff, a singer, tells them that he will come in and settle everything peacefully with the power of music. But before she goes through the door, she is stopped by Carthage, who does enter through the door. Chapter 5. Waking up, Kang doesn't know where he is, but suddenly Carthage appears to him and tells him that he must be the strongest of all, although our protagonist tells him that he is still Class F, although he became stronger by training him. Then Carthage, with an attack, opens the space and takes out a magic stone, which they use as a source of energy, but Carthage places it on a goblin, with whom Kang must fight, as a second training. At the beginning of the fight, the goblin hits him 80 times, whereupon Carthage tells him that he would have already died. Then Kang thinks that he can't attack him like he normally would with the shield, so he uses a special attack, and with it, he ends up splitting the goblin in half. At the end, Cartago congratulates him, but our protagonist is dizzy, and before fainting he asks Cartago why he helps him, to which he replies that he will understand with time. When he wakes up again, our protagonist is inside the dungeon and with the magic stone at his side, thinking that this will help him money. He sees the last door, and when he enters, he finds a very clean palace, but suddenly a champion skeleton appears, which is giant, and goes to attack our protagonist. Then he doubts if he will defeat him. And Carthage, hearing him doubt, begins to tell him never to do it, activating his maximum protection, with which our protagonist launches to fight against the champion skeleton. Chapter 6. Now we see Kang fighting against the champion skeleton, but although he moves away to keep his distance and dodge his blows, he manages to attack him and injures our protagonist, who thinks he is very strong. And it is not fair. He also has little mana left and he can only use it in 2 turns. He dodges one of the skeleton champion's attacks and attacks him, managing to cut off his arm, although this makes it faster. But our protagonist, he thinks that Carthage's spears are faster, so he can still dodge it, and with the second attack, he manages to defeat it. Suddenly, we see a person from the dungeon administration, who is talking on the phone in front of a portal, saying that this class a portal was opened a while ago, and that all those who have entered have been defeated, so they must prepare for when the monsters come out of there. But suddenly, our protagonist comes out of there, wounded and tired, who surprises the man who was talking on the phone, who, seeing Kang, asks about the other hunters, but Kang only tells him that they all died. In that, this man introduces himself as Kyung-ho Park and asks Kang for his hunter's license. He gives it to him and surprises the administration, seeing that he is from Class F. We went to some offices, where there is a man eating, until Kyung-ho arrives, telling him that there is a hunter who had a second awakening, showing our protagonist on his cell phone, as the only survivor of a Class B dungeon. This surprises his boss, but he sends him to continue with an investigation of the class of Brig, since not even one of Class S, a second awakening had happened, and it would cost a lot to train such a hunter. This makes Kyung-ho leave the office, thinking of investigating our protagonist on his own. Chapter 7. Now we see our protagonist wanting to rest after the battle, when suddenly Hashishin appears to him, who tells him that another past life wanted to meet him before him, but he took a shortcut, since, in the future, his help will be more useful than that of the other lives. So they start with the training. Hashishin transforms into a shadow with giant eyes and tells him that he will aim for his heart. When he blocks it, they will end the training, suddenly appearing from the floor, swords that begin to attack. Finishing up, Hashishin tells Kang that the stronger he gets, the more he will plunge into darkness, like the shady guild executives, for example. We then see Kang wanting to appraise his magic stone and shield, so the receptionist tells him that it would be more than 18,000 coins and 900 commission, but that he must wait because the agents are busy asking for his hunter's license, while our protagonist thinks that the commission is very expensive. But when he is going to sit down, we see that the girl is calling and talking about our protagonist as the survivor of the Class B dungeon. Later we see a conversation between Hyeonjun and another person, where she told him about her expedition in the dungeon where she died and how this person no longer got contact with her. So we later see that this person was actually the director of guilds, Sungmin Young, who is worried about her and asks one of her employees to find out about that dungeon. The clerk makes a call, then tells Sungmin that all but one died. We go to see our protagonist, who is bored waiting, when suddenly Kyung-ho arrives, who tells him that they should talk elsewhere. Outside the offices, they finish talking and Kyung-ho tells Kang that thanks to his collaboration he will be able to close his investigation. But he also gives him another hunter's license, but now Class C, for which Kang is grateful. We return to Sungmin, who asks his employee, Hyung-suk, to bring him the survivor from the dungeon. Chapter 8. After that, Kang is with Suk-ju celebrating his promotion from F class to C class, when the latter tells our protagonist that he is now famous throughout the administration for surviving the dungeon all by himself, being an F class porter. This surprises Kang, but Suk-ju tells him that a while ago there was a case similar to his, because it deals with hunters who have a second awakening, the best known being Jinu Han, an SS class hunter, who had survived with a second awakening, and he was the only SS class hunter, so he was accepted into Asura, a diamond level guild, getting more prestige after he was accepted. Also, Suk-ju tells him that they should already contact Kang to recruit him, and not just give him Class C. When Jinu Han was given Class A, he barely got the second awakening from him, complaining to our protagonist that everything should be fine by now due to everything he suffered, but Kang doesn't want to talk about it. After finishing drinking, Suk-ju is taking a taxi, but before he tells our protagonist that everything will improve from now on and leaves, So our protagonist thinks about going to rest too. In that, while walking, our protagonist feels that he is being followed and Hyeonjun possesses him. Then two men appear to him and ask him to accompany him, showing them some swords. Our protagonist is fearful and accepting to go with them. So these men lower their guard and Kang takes advantage of this to want to flee. In that, Chocho, one of the men, throws himself with his knives and cuts our protagonist, although he realizes that he has not done her any harm, as if she were a shadow that passes through. So our protagonist takes advantage of Chocho's second attack to dodge him, and using his aura, he defeats him and takes away his weapon. The other man launches the attack, but without realizing it, our protagonist had already attacked and defeated him, leaving him bloody on the floor. Kang approaches him and asks who sent him, but he tells him to kill him, because he won't tell her anything. And our protagonist approaches him and ends his life, also that Hyeonjun's shadow manages to get rid of the evidence of him. Then we see how Kang arrives at his house and lies down to rest. The next day he asks his friend if he arrived safely, while he prepares something to eat, but Sukju tells him that he got another group for him and he should go now, so he runs out, takes his shield and takes a taxi. When suddenly the taxi is attacked by a fireball, which hits them. Chapter 9. Our protagonist escapes from the taxi just before being hit, and when he realizes there is an army of orcs led by an orc magician who escaped from the dungeon, so Kang, thinking that he will be late for his group, launches to attack them, going first to the leader, defeating him. In that, a woman approaches him and since Kang doesn't have a guild, she invites him to join Ace, her guild, and which is quite well known, and runs away without telling him his name. But before accepting, our protagonist sees how scared people come out of the subway, so he thinks that they are coming out from down there, and although he knows that it will be dangerous for him to go alone, he remembers what Sukju told him about how they gave Jinwoo Han Class A, and he goes to attack them to obtain the same class. Upon arrival, he sees everything in flames, but does not see anyone, not even the orcs, noting that someone had disposed of the corpses, when suddenly an injured man appears who tells him to run away, that he is dangerous. This man sits on the floor while he tells our protagonist that it is not a common escape from a dungeon, that it was caused by someone. When the men of the Eco Special Forces appear, which are going to attack our protagonist and the man. Our protagonist uses his auras and begins to dodge everyone's attacks and block with the shield in order to start attacking them. Chapter 10. Suddenly, our protagonist pulls out a sword and begins to defeat everyone without any effort. And when there was one left, he thinks that now no one will protect him, not even the guild, so he will go after the wounded man. In that, this attacker throws a smoke bomb and begins to run towards the injured guy, when suddenly, he is hit by Kang, defeating him. The man sees our protagonist and is surprised to see that he faced off alone against 4 of those members. Asking him if he is from Class A, our protagonist does not answer that, but he does give him his name. The man tells him to wait, since the containment team is already outside, and he asks her to join the Lace Guild, where he will reward him, since it is the director of the Special Forces, Taemin Kim. But our protagonist tells him that he will think about it and leaves. Some time passes and our protagonist decides to agree to join the Lace Guild. So, he is standing in the offices of the Special Forces. He calls Taemin Kim and he goes down to meet him. Later, we see them in a restaurant, where Taemin Kim gives our protagonist a dimensional pocket, since he carries his weapons wherever he goes, and proposes that he help the Lace Guild. In that, another of the past lives tells him to accept the proposal because it smells of death, so Kang asks Taemin Kim about this proposal. He tells him that they will have an informal confrontation with the Eco Group, which is the same as a regular confrontation. Only here you can kill. The past life suggests that he accept, but our protagonist, despite thinking about the reward, rejects it, because he doesn't want to put his life in danger. So, Taemin understands, but he proposes that he help them whenever they need it, and our protagonist accepts that, with a smile on his face. Chapter 11. Now we see that our protagonist is in the administration offices again, talking to the receptionist, and apparently Kang wants to enter a dungeon alone, even if it is a high-level one. But she rejects him because for that he must be accompanied by at least one class of fighter, or be a member of a professional strike group. In that, it is reminiscent of the Ace Guild, so he agrees to go out with that girl. Seeing each other in a cafe, he asks her if she has attack dates from a professional group, and although she thought he wanted to join her guild, he still tells her that his team will attack a level B dungeon and invites him to go with them. Since it is the next day, that day arrives and we see that our protagonist leaves his apartment and is surprised that a car is waiting for him. Kang goes up thinking that these professional groups are different when he realizes that the girl was there, starting to ask him to join her guild. When they arrive, the Ace Attack group is introduced, with the A-class hunter Hansuk Choi, leader of this attack group, and brother of Yesel, the girl who invited our protagonists. Hansuk introduces himself and starts encouraging our protagonist to join his guild, when he is interrupted by Dusik, another hunter, which tells him that when entering a dungeon of level B and above, it is difficult to attack with a normal sword, so he gives him a special sword, telling him that he follows orders, since now they are team. Hansuk shows them the order of attack and they prepare to enter, using level of space magic. Hansuk opens a portal to the dungeon and monsters from the spirit world are seen. Although Hansuk manages to attack one of those monsters from a spell, but it gets angry and they all attack. While they were fighting, Hansuk casts his spell again and defeats the monster with one blow, showing our protagonist the level of a professional attack group. At that, Dusik tells Hansuk that the dungeon is short, but our protagonist thinks that even if it is short, the leader must be much stronger. Chapter 12. As they continue advancing, they see a door and upon opening it, Gwangbin is attacked by nightmares. Hansuk orders to maintain the formation and realizes that there are 12 level B monsters. So, thinking of Gwangbin, he casts another spell and defeats several. This is noticed by our protagonist, who also realizes that everyone is already tired and that it would be dangerous if he does nothing. Therefore, Danzig's determination takes over him, and although he breaks the formation, Hansuk covers him so that Kang can continue attacking and defeating the remaining nightmares. At the end, the leader appears, who attacks Kang directly, but he blocks the attack with an aura shield, which surprises Hansuk. But the attack leaves our protagonist's arm immobile, until Danzig uses the physical and recovery power increase on him, which gives Kang more strength to keep attacking, while Hansuk orders Yesel to buff. In that, we see how our protagonist is fighting against the leader, and Kang decides to go for his center, giving up on obtaining the magic stone from that leader. Seeing the center of it, he finds the magic stone and attacks, defeating it. So Hansuk looks at it, thinking that this is the strength of someone with a second awakening and what it would be like if he joined them. After that, they run to help Gwangbin and our protagonist take advantage of this to leave, and avoid being insisted on joining. So he says goodbye and asks them to deposit the money. The next day, he receives a deposit of 50,000, though he falls asleep, feeling tired. In that, we see a door and a voice that tells our protagonist that the last saint of the sword was waiting for him. Chapter 13. When that door opens, a sword appears and a voice tells Kang to take it. He obeys, and Sidon Miller, one of his past lives, appears, which asks if she can use the sword of aura like when he took over his body. Kang realizes that it's like using the aura shield, although it's not as easy to use, for which Sidon begins to help him, passing him the magical power. And although at first he can't stand the shock of sword magic, in the end, he manages to control it and learn to use it. So, when Sidon sees this, he tells him to teach him his technique, showing it to him. Although our protagonist, he thinks that, if he overcame the lesson of Carthage, he will do it easily. Although then we see him exhausted, and Sidon congratulating him for learning the technique from him, telling him that they will continue later if he is ready, so Kang leaves, leaving Sidon thinking that he might do it this time, if possible. By day, our protagonist is in a park and begins to remember Sidon's technique to practice it, since soon it is his informal fight and he wants to become stronger. Chapter 14. The day of the informal confrontation arrives, and our protagonist is in a car with Taemin Kim, which tells Kang that his team is made up of 2 Class B and 4 Class C. And although our protagonist asks about the Echo Group's military force, Taemin Kim tells him that his intelligence group does not have the capacity to gather that kind of information. But Taemin Kim tells him that, without his help, they would be defeated by that group, and that they trust him so much that they give him permission to attack freely. This is accepted by our protagonist, who asks them for clothes, since he has to train. Upon arrival, we see our protagonist changed, although he feels that they are being watched and thinks it is an ambush. So Taemin Kim puts on a mask and tells Kang to be ready, because the confrontation started since he arrived at that place, appearing all the equipment of this one. Our protagonist thinks that it is a good time to test his new ability, and he launches to attack, thinking of eliminating the ambushers first. So, finding them, he summons his sword and defeats them. The other group sees this and their leader orders that they all attack our protagonist together, but he ends up defeating everyone, leaving only his leader. This leader begins to go towards our protagonist to attack him, so Kang thinks of defeating and ending the battle, and they both launch the attack. At one point, the leader orders them to continue attacking and they throw a fireball at our protagonist, who was fighting with this leader. But Kang manages to block the fireball with his sword, and the leader takes the opportunity to attack him, believing that he will not be able to block it at all. But our protagonist stops him. This leader tells him to give up, because they have already won, and our protagonist realizes that the Eco Group has already defeated everyone, and this leader tells him that he alone will not be able to against the entire group. So if he surrenders, they will let him live. This makes our protagonist despair, since he is in a place where no one can help him, and he begins to yell at his past lives, asking for their help, until another past life appears. Chapter 15. Suddenly he hears a voice saying that the blood from the massacre woke up death. Part of the deadly instinct is released. So another sword appears to him, and the voice tells him that his cry was heard to the depths of hell, asking him to kill everyone and let him hear his pleas. Our protagonist thinks that he has recovered his magical power and begins to attack everyone, while this past life tells him that it will show him the weaknesses of his opponents, asking him to exterminate everyone, while the instinct that he has just awakened turns him into a thirsty killer. In that, our protagonist sees the weak points of the attackers and begins to fight, leaving only two, thinking that he can defeat them. With the help of death, these two launch to attack our protagonist, who hits one with a sword and ends up defeating him when he wants to grab the aura sword with his hands. But the other takes advantage of this and attacks our protagonist, but is shot down by Kang, who had the other sword. In that, we see how one of the attackers, badly wounded, begins to crawl wanting to flee, but our protagonist does not allow him, defeating him, and death asks him to destroy all those who are still alive. So, Kang, thinking that he should kill everyone, since this is how you win in informal confrontations, he approaches the survivors and ends up destroying them. At the end, Taemin Kim, wounded, approaches Kang, asking him if they won, and he tells him that he killed everyone, while his arm trembled, for which he thanks him and tells him that they already deposited the money. Our protagonist thanks, thinking that he will never do something like this again, although seeing that they paid him 150 million, he thinks that he will do it again. On the other hand, Sungmin Young's employee tells him that he can no longer communicate with Hyungsuk or with anyone, these being the best, but the employee tells him that the other group hired a mercenary, so Sungmin Young ordered him to find out who that mercenary is, asking him to take care of him so as not to disappoint anyone. Chapter 16. Then we see our protagonist thinking about all the money he earned, even though he risked his life and can't do it for his family from the orphanage, seeing a photo of this family. Later we see Kang arrive at the orphanage with a gift, and when he enters looking for the director, he finds Sojin, a friend, who is helping because the director is not feeling well because she is no longer young. But in that, the director appears reneging and sending Sojin to work as a support hunter because she is a C-class hunter, and both think that it must be exhausting to help in the orphanage and fight in the dungeons. In that, the director realizes the gifts of our protagonist and complains to him for spending more, but he tells them that he is now Class C and they pay him much better. Although the director asks him if he is doing dangerous things, he refuses and takes advantage of going out with Sojin to deliver gifts to the children, leaving the director alone, thinking about how he grew up and went from being a child to a hunter. Outside, we see that Kang tells Sojin that he will take care of the orphanage's debt when all the children arrive, excited by the gifts, although they tell him that they are more than happy to see him. Then the director comes out, telling everyone to eat, because our protagonist also brought them pizza. And already inside, while everyone ate, Hashishin notices the presence of a being behind Kang, who is watching him, which makes our protagonist take notice and ask everyone to duck, pulling out his shield just as an explosion occurs. Chapter 17. At the end of the explosion, our protagonist invokes the Sword of Sidon and the Shield of Carthage, while he orders Sojin to protect the director and the children. On leaving, he realizes that they had sent 20 soldiers to capture him, although they tell him that their boss wants his head, so they all attack at the same time. Our protagonist defeats one of them, and they decide to go for Sojin and the children, so our protagonist uses his shield to distract them and attack them, quickly defeating them. Although this exhausts our protagonist, who sees that there are still several to defeat, thinking that he could not, so he invokes death, with which he manages to defeat several in one attack. But he feels tired again, and the others take advantage of this to attack him and thus defeat him. Sojin runs to heal him, but realizes that his healing powers don't work on him. In that, our protagonist hears another voice that tells him to fight and protect his loved ones and not regret it, that he will give him strength. Suddenly, we see our protagonist standing in front of a burning door. Chapter 18. Kang wonders who this life will be, and when he opens the door he finds a hill of corpses and at the top a gentleman, who introduces himself as Danzig, who tells him that if he bears his pain, he will give him all the strength to protect his loved ones, as he could not. Our protagonist accepts, so Danzig tells him that now he will show him his past. Suddenly, they appear in a meadow and our protagonist cannot speak, so Danzig tells him that he can watch more, not intervene in his past. In that, we see that Danzig is received by his daughter and by his wife, besides that it is seen that they are a very happy family. Until a soldier named Craig arrives, who calls Danzig commander and tells him that there is bad news, and he tells her that they set up an attack post and the target is his kingdom. Then we cut to seeing everyone dead on the floor and Danzig realizing it was Craig, and his whole family thinking it was a dream. Therefore, our protagonist understands his pain, thinking that this is how he would feel if he does not protect the orphanage. In addition, Kang sees how to end up defeating Danzig in the midst of his despair and frustration for not having protected anyone. So now Danzig tells him that his hate will make him stronger, since his powers passed to him. So our protagonist feels his new strength and the doors open again, and Danzig tells him to go and show their strength. Chapter 19. We return to the battle, and we see that a beam of light comes out of our protagonist and he gets up without a scratch, for he will not tire as long as he has the determination of Danzig, and his sword will not break as long as he has the righteous power of Sidon. Then the attackers call it a monster, and this made our protagonist awaken his cruel murderous instinct of death, telling them that it will be that if they want, starting to attack and defeating everyone. In that, they all attack him and even cast a very powerful spell on him, but this one does nothing to him. Therefore, our protagonist continues to defeat him, and although the wizards continue to cast spells, he defeats them, until reaching one who manages to hit him with his sword and make Kang go back. But he hears Danzig's voice and recovers to fight and end up defeating that attacker. Before falling, the boy tells him that even if they die, his boss won't leave him alone. But Kang tells him that they got the wrong person and defeats him with one blow. Suddenly, he sees some attackers who are kneeling on the ground, asking for mercy, but he tells them that they still wanted to kill him and he kills them with an attack. At the end, our protagonist is bathed in the blood of the opponents and can only tell Sajin that it's all over before falling unconscious. When he wakes up, he finds himself in the hospital and with him is Taemin and Sajin, who see him worried. Kang asks Sajin for water, so he leaves, and Taemin takes the opportunity to tell our protagonist that the entire hospital is being watched by his group, so they don't get attacked there. Our protagonist asks what happened while he was passed out, and Taemin tells him that the police questioned Sajin, and although she told them that they were attacked by special forces, there is no evidence of it, since it was difficult to protect the evidence to take care of the safety of the children, which our protagonist understands, and asks about the director and the children. Taemin tells him that they are in his guild office, and that he thinks it was with a spy, how the Echo group managed to find him. Also, Kang asks him for protection for his family, so Taemin tells her that she will make sure they protect the orphanage and will participate in the confrontation against the Echo group, promising that he will use all his resources to protect her family. But our protagonist asks him if he can finish off the spy, so Taemin tells him that they will do everything possible to find him and finish him off. Upon hearing this, our protagonist tells him that he trusts him and to let him rest. Then we see how Taemin's employees tell him that they have the spy, so Taemin orders to go after him. Chapter 20. Entering a warehouse where the spy has been captured, and Taemin tells him that if he didn't want to die, he shouldn't have done anything, so, since no one will come to save him, now they can have fun with him, while he summons a sword. Now we see our protagonist, who entered the room of his past lives, and is received by Hashashin. Although Kang takes advantage and asks for his strength, so Hashashin tells him that he will teach her to hide his body and presence in a dark place. And although our protagonist doesn't think it's possible, Hashashin tells him not to compare him to worms like that, and that he's special, but to use that technique you need high-level magic range, which spends a lot of energy, and because of that, it will lock you in infinite darkness. He also tells him that he must become familiar with the darkness if he will put his life in its hands, although the infinite darkness can drive him mad, asking him if he will still try. Our protagonist does not doubt and accepts instantly, so Hashashin starts wishing Kang luck, and suddenly nothing is visible anymore. Once inside, our protagonist thinks that he would go crazy if he spends a few days there, although as time passes, he begins to despair and think that he will go crazy, asking someone to get him out of there and wondering how much more he must endure to get out of that darkness. In that, while he thought that Hashashin had already returned, he realizes that, in the darkness, beings with his shape appeared, who began to insult him, calling him weak. This makes our protagonist desperate, who yells at Hashashin, and Hashashin tells him that he helped him a little, because he saw him as desperate, apologizing if he offended him. But in the end, he ends up pulling him out of that darkness and congratulating him on learning one of his techniques, telling her that although her affinity for darkness is not perfect, not many men have it, and saying goodbye to her. The next day, Kang wakes up to still be in the hospital, so he sees his cell phone and realizes that only a day has passed, although he feels that it was a year. In that, Taemin enters our protagonist's room and tells him that they already caught the spy. This surprises our protagonist, because not even 24 hours had passed, although he later asks about the situation of the Echo group and Taemin tells him that they are preparing a second attack, so they have gathered all the hunters that were. But suddenly, our protagonist begins to get dressed, and a scared Taemin asks him if he's going to attack Iko's office, which our protagonist accepts, telling him that he won't stand idly by. Taemin tells him that it is impossible to attack an entire guild, and our protagonist tells him that he will only defeat his special forces, and that maybe the day before it could have been impossible, but not that day, leaving, while he asks Taemin to take care of his family. Night falls and our protagonist arrives at the Grupo Eco office, so he activates the Hashishin technique, whereupon he becomes a shadow, thinking that that day will be the end of the Echo Guild.